You can very easily draw with pens on your Cricut with just a few easy steps. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how, and I'm also going to show you so many of these super best practices that you can use to make sure that you're getting the absolute most out of your pen drawing function. My name is Kelly, and let's get clacking. Now, there are two main ways that you can draw with your Cricut. The first way is to change the operation from cut to pen, and what that'll do is it'll just change the outline of whatever it is that you have typed in, and it'll, instead of cut, it'll now actually draw that outline. The other method is to change the style of the font. So typically when you have your font, it'll just be the normal style. But if you use the little drop down just to the right of the font section, it'll actually have a style option. And when you change this style to writing, it'll completely change the look of most of the fonts that you're going to be choosing. Some of the fonts might be quite thin, so you might not see that much of a change. This then essentially has the text optimized for writing. So it knows that you're wanting to have it written on a piece of paper or whatever the case may be. So it actually has a different way of essentially rendering the fonts on your computer. And for most fonts, you'll get a much nicer look. Now, it's obviously important to note that not all fonts have the writing option. So when you're scrolling through the fonts, I would highly recommend using the filter. So you can actually filter out some of the fonts that don't have a writing style, if that's the kind of look that you're going for. Now, if the font that you want to use doesn't have a writing style, then I normally go with a different method. By using the offset feature, you can actually combat this. What I normally do is I use multiple internal offsets to kind of thicken up the font and get it to essentially color in or fill in the font. Editing Kelly here. So one of the things that I forgot to mention about this feature is that if you're wanting to use the internal offset, you're going to have to change the operation to pen. You won't be able to have the writing style, as the writing style will essentially already kind of make it into a single line design. So you won't really be able to use the offset feature to its fullest functionality. And of course, you can pretty much completely color in the entire word, which is pretty cool. So if you have something that's slightly thicker, of course, the more internal offsets that you do, the thicker your word will be, and you can be able to fill in the entire word, which might be pretty cool. Now, in the offset feature, you'll see that it has a sliding scale. Now, already this is in the positive side of the scale, so it's on the right-hand side of the little gray bar. But if you drag it to the left-hand side, you'll see it goes into a negative. Now, that means it's going to then be an internal offset. I normally set this offset to whatever thickness the pen is that I'm using. So in the case of using a normal 0.4mm pen, you can have this at 0.4mm or 0.3mm, depending on if you want the color to be a little bit more bold, or if you don't want there to be as many gaps, as obviously it'll leave gaps in some places, which you can just go and fill in afterwards if you want. If you are looking for a more comprehensive tutorial on how to fill in your fonts, I will leave a link to a video up at the top there for you to watch. If you have a nice, super complicated drawing and you want to make sure that it has many different colors, you can change the color of the lines that you have in Cricut Design Space. So if you have an actual floral design, you can use the contour feature to, remove some sections of the design and then change the different layers very much like you would for vinyl, but you just change the colors. And then Cricut Design Space will actually prompt you to change the colors of the pen. So once it's written with the black pen, it'll stop and it'll say, okay, insert the red pen, and then it'll draw, and then you'll stop again, and then it'll say insert the yellow pen, etc. So you won't have to worry about, missing the pens, as an example. And then you can have a project with multiple different colors on it. If you are looking for a more comprehensive tutorial, I will leave a link to a video up at the top there for you to watch. Another thing that I like to use with my Cricut pens is to, when I'm changing the colors, is I actually use that feature to make sure that I'm getting the right thickness. So as an example, some of the metallic pens are a 1mm width, and that's quite a chunky pen. So if you are looking at your design and it shows a very thin line, and maybe you've got a very fine font, if you use a chunky 1mm pen, then you're not going to get the same look as what it looks like on Design Space. So at the top of where you select your colors, there will be another little drop down. And in that drop down, you can then change the actual pen that you're going to be using. So you can either change it to a fine point or a 1mm metallic or the gel pens or whatever the kind of pen is that is the most accurate description to what you're using if you're not using the Cricut pens. Of course, if you aren't using the Cricut pens, then congratulations, you found a pen that either fits that little holder or you've managed to take the holder out and get a different pen holder. Now, it is also important to note that if you have a Cricut Joy and you have an Explore or a Maker, the pens that you get for the Cricut Joy are not compatible with the Cricut Explore or the Maker, and vice versa. So unfortunately, the pens that are made for the Explore and the Maker are compatible with each other, so you can use those interchangeably, but the Joy have their own pens, so you won't be able to use those in the other machines. It's also important to note that the infusible ink pens are not typically meant to be used for normal drawing. Although you can definitely use them for normal drawing, they are quite a bit pricier, so it might be far more cost effective to get the actual Cricut pens as opposed to using the infusible ink pens for normal coloring in purposes. But, of course, if you're in a bind, it should work just fine. I'm not sure how it's going to last in the long term, as they might, fade a little bit, as they are obviously meant to be heat activated pens. So maybe just keep that in mind when you're actually using the infusible ink pens. Now, the Cricut pens come in a wide variety of styles and colors. You get the normal pens, you get metallic pens, gel pens, fine point pens, extra fine point pens. They really are very nice. I have quite a few of them and I've played around with them quite a bit. I would definitely recommend storing them upside down so that the ink is saturated at the bottom and you don't have to worry about, having the pens writing dry for a few seconds or so while the ink comes down to the bottom. You can use other pens in your Cricut, but what you will need to remember is to change the actual adapter. The Cricut pens are all designed to fit into the adapter that comes with the machine, and you can actually take this adapter out and replace it with another part. It'll probably have to be a 3D printed part or something like that. Editing Kelly here again. I wanted to mention that I didn't specify that this would only be that's my poops making a noise. So to be able to change the adapter for the pens is only available for the Cricut Explore and the Cricut Maker ranges. As far as I know, the Cricut Joy, you can't actually remove the entire housing, so you will need to use the pens that the Cricut Joy makes, or find pens that fit into the slot that's existing there already. So you won't really have too much flexibility with that, but with the larger machines you'll be able to have a lot more flexibility, and you can search sites like Thingiverse for the different STL files to be able to 3D print, and then you can use those to use multiple different pens in your machine. So what you will be able to do on your machine is to bend the clasp back a little bit further, and then you should be able to pop out the little holder from its seating or housing and then replace it with a different one. I would definitely recommend caution when removing this, as I'm a little bit terrified of breaking my machine, and I haven't yet, luckily, but please be very careful when you're removing this, as you can break your machine, and unfortunately I can't accept liability when doing that. If you're wanting to watch some more Cricut Design Space tutorials, there's a playlist up here for you to watch. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more Cricut videos in the future, and I'll see you in my next video. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon!